The morning sun cast long shadows across the training compound at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado as Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez adjusted her rifle scope for the 100th time that week. The other members of SEAL Team 7 were already gathering around the briefing table, their voices carrying the easy camaraderie that came from months of training together. But as Maria approached, the conversation seemed to shift, becoming more guarded, more careful. "Here comes our little sharpshooter," muttered Petty Officer First Class Jake Morrison, not bothering to lower his voice. The comment drew a few chuckles from the group, though some of the men looked uncomfortable. Maria had heard variations of this sentiment countless times since joining the team 6 months ago. She was the first woman to successfully complete the grueling SEAL training program and earn her place on an active team, a fact that seemed to fascinate and irritate her teammates in equal measure. Lieutenant Commander David Chen, the team leader, looked up from the satellite images spread across the table. His expression was neutral, professional, but Maria caught the slight tightening around his eyes that suggested he had heard Morrison's comment. "Rodriguez, good timing. We were just going over tomorrow's mission parameters." Maria nodded and took her place at the table, ignoring the way Morrison shifted slightly away from her. She had learned early in her military career that proving herself meant more than just meeting the same standards as her male counterparts. She had to exceed them consistently and without complaint if she wanted to earn even grudging respect. The mission briefing was straightforward on paper. Intelligence had located a high-value target in a compound approximately 200 miles inland from their current position. The target was a known arms dealer who had been supplying weapons to insurgent groups throughout the region. The team would insert via helicopter under cover of darkness, neutralize the target, gather intelligence, and extract before dawn. "Rodriguez will provide overwatch from the eastern ridge," Chen announced, pointing to a topographical feature on the map. "The position offers clear sight lines to the compound and multiple egress routes." Morrison leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "Sir, with all due respect, shouldn't we have our most experienced sniper in that position? This is a critical mission, and Rodriguez has only been with the team for 6 months." The comment hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Maria felt the familiar heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her expression neutral. She had expected this. Morrison had been the team's designated marksman for 3 years before her arrival, and her presence had effectively relegated him to a secondary role. "Rodriguez scored highest on the range last month," Chen replied evenly. "Her scores consistently outperformed the team average by 15%. She earned the position." "Range scores don't mean much when bullets start flying for real," Morrison shot back. "Has she ever taken a life, sir? Because I guarantee you, when that moment comes, all the training in the world won't prepare her for what it feels like to watch a human being die through a scope." Maria could feel every pair of eyes on her, waiting for her response. She had been in combat situations before, had fired her weapon in anger, but Morrison was right about one thing. She had never been in a position where she was required to take a deliberate, aimed shot at another human being with time to think about it. The possibility had haunted her dreams more than she cared to admit. "The decision has been made," Chen said firmly. "Rodriguez takes the overwatch position. Morrison, you'll be part of the assault team." Any other questions? The briefing continued for another hour, covering extraction procedures, communication protocols, and contingency plans. Maria absorbed every detail, knowing that her teammates' lives might depend on her performance. When the session ended, most of the team dispersed to check their equipment and prepare for the mission. Morrison, however, lingered behind. "Look, Rodriguez," he said, his voice lower now, almost conspiratorial. "I'm not trying to be a jerk here. You're a good soldier, better than most. But this isn't about politics or equality or any of that stuff. This is about bringing everyone home alive." Maria met his gaze steadily. "That's exactly what I intend to do." Morrison studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "I hope so, because if you freeze up out there, if you hesitate for even a second when the team needs you, people are going to die, and their blood will be on your hands." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Maria alone with her thoughts and the weight of his words. She knew he was right to be concerned. The responsibility of being the team's primary sniper was enormous. One missed shot, one moment of hesitation, could compromise the entire mission and cost lives. That evening, Maria found herself in the base's small chapel. a place she had discovered during her first weeks of training. The quiet space offered her a refuge from the constant scrutiny and doubt that seemed to follow her everywhere. She wasn't particularly religious, but something about the silence and the soft light filtering through the stained glass windows helped calm her mind. Nervous about tomorrow? Maria turned to see Chaplain Williams, a kind-faced man in his 50s who had served with Special Operations Forces for over 2 decades. He had counseled countless soldiers through the psychological challenges of combat, and Maria had sought his advice several times during her integration with the team. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't," Maria admitted. "It's not the mission itself that worries me. It's the expectations, the pressure to prove myself." Chaplain Williams took a seat in the pew beside her. "You know, I've counseled a lot of soldiers over the years, men and women both. The ones who worry me aren't the ones who are nervous before their first real combat mission. It's the ones who aren't nervous that concern me. Morrison thinks I'll freeze up when the moment comes. What do you think?" Maria considered the question carefully. "I think I've spent my entire career preparing for moments like this. I think my training is solid, my skills are sharp, and I've proven myself in every test they've thrown at me. But I also think there's no way to know for certain how you'll react until you're actually there." "That's honest," the chaplain replied, "and honesty is the foundation of courage. False bravado gets people killed. Honest assessment of your abilities and limitations keeps them alive." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Maria spoke again. "What if he's right, though? What if I do hesitate? Then you'll deal with it when it happens," Chaplain Williams said simply. "But worrying about hypothetical failures won't help you succeed. Focus on what you can control, your preparation, your mindset, your commitment to your teammates." Maria nodded, feeling some of the tension in her shoulders ease. She had always been her own harshest critic, pushing herself harder than anyone else ever could. Perhaps it was time to trust in her preparation and her abilities. The next morning came earlier than she would have preferred. The team gathered in the pre-dawn darkness, their faces painted with camouflage, and their gear checked and rechecked. The helicopter ride to the insertion point was conducted in relative silence, each member lost in their own pre-mission rituals and thoughts. As they flew over the dark landscape below, Maria found herself reviewing the mission parameters one final time. Her position on the eastern ridge would put her approximately 800 meters from the target compound, well within her effective range, but far enough away to avoid detection. She would have clear sight lines to the main building and could cover the team's approach and withdrawal. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. 2 minutes to insertion. Maria felt her heart rate increase slightly, a natural physiological response that she had learned to manage rather than fight. She closed her eyes and ran through her breathing exercises, centering herself for what lay ahead. The helicopter touched down briefly in a small clearing, just long enough for the team to disembark before lifting off again into the night sky. The sudden silence that followed was almost deafening after hours of rotor noise. Chen used hand signals to direct the team's movement, and they began their infiltration toward the target area. Maria split off from the main group after the first kilometer, making her way carefully up the rocky slope toward her designated position. The terrain was challenging, with loose stones and occasional patches of thorny vegetation that caught at her uniform. She moved slowly and deliberately, knowing that a single misstep could send rocks tumbling down the hillside and alert any sentries to her presence. It took her nearly an hour to reach the ridgeline and locate the optimal firing position. The spot offered excellent concealment among a cluster of large boulders, while providing clear sight lines to the compound below. She set up her rifle carefully, adjusting the bipod legs and checking her scope settings one final time. Through her scope, the compound looked peaceful in the pale pre-dawn light. A few lights were visible in the main building, but there was no sign of movement. Intelligence reports suggested that the target would be present, but there was always the possibility that the information was outdated or incorrect. "Overwatch in position," Maria whispered into her radio, her voice barely audible even to herself. "Copy, Overwatch," came Chen's response. "Beginning approach." Maria watched through her scope as the assault team moved into position around the compound. They moved like ghosts in the dim light, their training and experience evident in every step. She felt a surge of pride at being part of such a professional unit. followed immediately by the sobering realization that their lives might soon depend on her skills. The first sign of trouble came when a door on the compound's eastern side suddenly opened, spilling yellow light into the courtyard. A figure emerged, clearly visible in Maria's scope. The man appeared to be carrying an automatic rifle and was scanning the area with obvious alertness. "Movement, east side," Maria reported quietly. "One armed individual appears to be conducting a patrol. Can you neutralize?" Chen's voice was tense. Maria centered her crosshairs on the figure's chest. The range was perfect, the conditions ideal. Her finger moved to the trigger, taking up the slack as she had done thousands of times in training. But this time, there was a human being at the other end of her scope. This time, pulling the trigger would end a life. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Maria found herself frozen. Morrison's words echoed in her mind. Has she ever taken a life? The figure in her scope turned slightly, and she could see his face clearly now. He looked young, perhaps not much older than herself. Did he have a family? Children? Overwatch status? Chen's voice cut through her paralysis. The sentry was moving now, walking directly toward the position where two members of her team were concealed. In seconds, he would discover them, and the mission would be compromised. Her teammates' lives hung in the balance, and she was the only one who could act. Maria's training took over. She steadied her breathing, centered her crosshairs, and squeezed the trigger in one smooth motion. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and through her scope, she watched the sentry crumple to the ground. "Target down," she reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Good shot," Chen replied. "Continue Overwatch." But Maria barely heard him. She was staring at the motionless figure in her scope, the first person she had ever killed. The reality of what she had just done hit her like a physical blow, and for a moment she thought she might be sick. But there was no time for such luxuries. The mission was still ongoing, and her team was depending on her. The assault phase proceeded smoothly after that. The team breached the compound and located their primary target within minutes. Intelligence gathering took slightly longer, but within an hour they were ready for extraction. Throughout it all, Maria maintained her Overwatch position, scanning for threats and providing updates on the tactical situation. As the extraction helicopter approached, Maria finally allowed herself to relax slightly. The mission had been a success and everyone was coming home alive. She began breaking down her equipment, preparing to move to the extraction point. It was then that Morrison's voice crackled through her headset, tinged with something that might have been respect. "Nice shooting, Rodriguez. That was a hell of a shot." Similar comments came from other team members as they regrouped for extraction. But the praise felt hollow to Maria. She had proven herself capable of killing when necessary, but the cost of that proof was a weight she would carry forever. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying them back to base, Maria stared out at the landscape below and wondered if Morrison had been right. The training hadn't prepared her for the psychological impact of taking a life, but it had prepared her to function despite that impact, to continue performing her duties even when her conscience was screaming at her. Back at base, the debriefing was thorough and professional. The mission was classified as a complete success, with the primary objective achieved and no casualties among the team. Maria's performance was specifically commended, and Chen made a point of praising her marksmanship and professionalism under pressure. But as she sat in her quarters later that night, staring at the ceiling and trying to sleep, Maria couldn't shake the image of the young man falling in her scope. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, had taken a life in service to her country and her teammates. The weight of that responsibility was heavier than anything she had carried before. A soft knock on her door interrupted her brooding. She opened it to find Morrison standing in the hallway, his expression unreadable. "Thought you might want to talk," he said simply. Maria stepped aside to let him in, surprised by the gesture. They had barely spoken since the mission briefing, and she hadn't expected any overtures of friendship from him. "I was wrong about you," Morrison said without preamble. "I thought you might freeze up when the moment came, but you didn't. You made the shot when it mattered, probably saved my life and Johnson's in the process. It doesn't feel like a victory," Maria admitted. Morrison nodded understandingly. "It never does. The first time I killed someone, I threw up for about 10 minutes afterward. Thought I was going to die from the guilt. But you know what the chaplain told me? He said that feeling guilty about taking a life, even in combat, even when it's necessary, means you're still human. The day it stops bothering you is the day you need to worry. They talked for nearly an hour, Morrison sharing his own experiences and offering advice on coping with the psychological aftermath of combat. It was a conversation Maria hadn't expected to have, especially not with someone who had been so skeptical of her abilities. "The team was wrong about you," Morrison said as he prepared to leave, "including me. You're not just a good soldier who happens to be a woman. You're a damn good SEAL, period, and I'm proud to serve with you." As the door closed behind him, Maria felt something shift inside her. The weight of what she had done would never fully disappear, but it no longer felt like a burden she had to carry alone. She was part of a team now, truly and completely, and that team had her back just as she had theirs. The mission had been a success in more ways than one. Not only had they achieved their objective, but Maria had proven to herself and her teammates that she belonged among the elite ranks of the Navy SEALs. The joke about her rank that Morrison had made seemed like ancient history now, replaced by genuine respect earned through performance under fire. But this was just the beginning. Maria knew that every mission would bring new challenges, new tests of her abilities and resolve. The enemy wouldn't care about her gender or her struggles for acceptance. They would only care about stopping her and her teammates from accomplishing their mission. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Maria's last conscious thought was of her teammates and the trust they had placed in her. She had not let them down, and she never would. The female sniper had found her place in the Brotherhood of Warriors, earned through blood and proved under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, new opportunities to prove herself. But tonight, for the first time since joining SEAL Team 7, Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez slept the sleep of a warrior who belonged. 3 months had passed since Maria's first kill, and the dynamic within SEAL Team 7 had shifted dramatically. The skeptical glances and whispered doubts had been replaced by the easy camaraderie that comes with mutual respect earned in combat. Morrison, once her harshest critic, had become one of her strongest advocates, often defending her capabilities to personnel from other units who questioned the wisdom of having a woman on an active SEAL team. The team had completed 6 more missions since that first operation, each one adding to Maria's reputation as an exceptional marksman and reliable teammate. Her confirmed kill count had risen to 7, a fact that both impressed and troubled her. She had learned to compartmentalize the psychological impact of taking lives, filing away the faces and memories in a mental vault that she could lock away during missions and deal with later in the privacy of her own mind. Lieutenant Commander Chen had been particularly impressed with Maria's development as both a sniper and a team member. Her ability to remain calm under pressure and make split-second decisions had saved lives on multiple occasions. More importantly, she had earned the unquestioning trust of her teammates, something that could never be mandated or forced, only earned through consistent performance in life-or-death situations. The briefing room at the forward operating base in eastern Afghanistan was thick with tension as Chen spread the latest intelligence photographs across the table. The team had been deployed to this remote outpost for 2 weeks, conducting reconnaissance and surgical strikes against high-value targets in the mountainous border region. The terrain was unforgiving, the weather unpredictable, and the enemy well-equipped and highly motivated. "Gentlemen and lady," Chen began, nodding toward Maria, "we have a problem. Intelligence has identified a new threat that requires immediate action." The photographs showed a heavily fortified compound nestled in a valley between 2 steep mountain ridges. Unlike their previous targets, this facility appeared to be more than just a safe house or weapons cache. The satellite images revealed extensive construction, multiple buildings, and what appeared to be a sophisticated communications array. "This is the headquarters for a new insurgent cell that's been coordinating attacks across the region," Chen continued. "The leader is a former Afghan military officer named Colonel Rashid Aziz, who defected to the insurgency 6 months ago. He's been using his military training and connections to organize increasingly sophisticated attacks on coalition forces." Petty Officer Second Class Danny Kim, the team's communications specialist, studied the images intently. "Sir, that communications setup looks pretty advanced. If they're coordinating regional operations from this location, taking it out could seriously disrupt insurgent activities." "Exactly," Chen replied. which is why this mission is classified as Priority Alpha. We need to eliminate Aziz and destroy that communications capability before they can relocate. Maria examined the topographical maps, her trained eye automatically identifying potential Overwatch positions and fields of fire. The compound was well situated defensively, with limited approaches and excellent visibility in all directions. Any assault would be costly and difficult, but the mission parameters demanded success regardless of the challenges. "What's our timeline, sir?" asked Chief Petty Officer Mike Sullivan, the team's senior enlisted advisor. 48 hours, Chen replied grimly. "Intelligence suggests they may be planning to relocate within the next week. We can't afford to wait." Morrison leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Sir, what kind of opposition are we expecting? This looks like more than just a few insurgents with AK-47s. Chen's expression grew more serious. "Intelligence estimates 30 to 40 fighters, well-armed and well-trained. Colonel Aziz has been recruiting former military personnel, so we can expect disciplined resistance. They also have heavy weapons, possibly including mortars and anti-aircraft capabilities." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This would be their most dangerous mission to date, against their most formidable opponent. The team had faced tough situations before, but nothing quite on this scale. "Rodriguez," Chen said, turning his attention to Maria, "I'm going to need you in a very exposed position for this one. The only viable Overwatch point is this ridge here." He pointed to a location on the map, approximately 1,200 meters from the target compound. "It's outside the effective range of most small arms, but you'll be visible to anyone with decent optics." Maria studied the position Chen had indicated. It was indeed exposed, offering little natural concealment and no easy escape routes. But it also provided commanding views of the entire compound and surrounding area. From that position, she could cover the team's approach, identify targets of opportunity, and provide early warning of any reinforcements. "I can work with that, sir," Maria replied confidently. "The range is well within my capabilities, and the elevation advantage will help with bullet drop compensation. There's one more thing," Chen added. "Colonel Aziz is reportedly an excellent marksman himself. Intelligence suggests he's equipped with a precision rifle and has sniper training from his military days. If he identifies your position, you could find yourself in a counter-sniper engagement." The prospect of facing another trained sniper in combat was both thrilling and terrifying. Maria had trained extensively in counter-sniper techniques, but she had never faced an opponent with comparable skills and training. The thought of being hunted by someone with her own capabilities while trying to protect her teammates added another layer of complexity to an already dangerous mission. "Understood, sir. I'll be ready." The next 24 hours were spent in intensive preparation. Maria spent hours studying the terrain maps and satellite imagery, memorizing every detail of her assigned position and the surrounding area. She calculated range cards for various targets within the compound, accounting for elevation differences, atmospheric conditions, and potential wind patterns. Air rifle, a custom-built .338 Lapua Magnum, received meticulous attention. She checked and rechecked every component, from the scope mounts to the trigger mechanism. The weapon had never failed her, but in a situation like this, even the smallest malfunction could prove fatal. She loaded her magazines with match-grade ammunition, each round hand-selected for consistent performance and accuracy. The team's final briefing took place as the sun was setting behind the mountains. The plan was complex but straightforward. Maria would insert alone via helicopter and establish her Overwatch position under cover of darkness. The assault team would approach on foot, using a circuitous route that would take several hours but provide better concealment. Once in position, they would wait for first light before beginning the attack. "Remember," Chen emphasized, "our primary objective is Colonel Aziz. Everything else is secondary. Rodriguez, you have authorization to engage any target that poses a threat to the team. Don't wait for confirmation if you have a clear shot at a high-value target." As the briefing concluded, each team member took a moment to check their personal equipment one final time. The ritual was both practical and psychological, a way of ensuring readiness while managing pre-mission anxiety. Maria found herself running through her mental checklist repeatedly, visualizing different scenarios and her responses to them. The helicopter ride to the insertion point was conducted in complete darkness, the aircraft flying low and fast to avoid detection by enemy radar or visual observation. Maria sat in silence, her rifle secured beside her, reviewing the mission parameters and trying to calm her racing heartbeat. The familiar pre-mission adrenaline was coursing through her system, sharpening her senses and preparing her body for the challenges ahead. The pilot's voice crackled through her headset. 1 minute to insertion. Maria checked her equipment one final time and prepared for the fast rope descent that would put her on the ground several kilometers from her target position. The helicopter would not land, instead hovering briefly while she rappelled down to minimize the aircraft's exposure to enemy fire. The descent went smoothly, and within seconds Maria found herself alone on a rocky plateau surrounded by the vast darkness of the Afghan mountains. The helicopter's rotor noise faded quickly, leaving her in a silence so complete it seemed to press against her eardrums. She took a moment to orient herself using her night vision equipment, then began the arduous climb toward her designated position. The ascent took nearly 3 hours, much of it over treacherous terrain that required careful movement to avoid injury or detection. Maria moved slowly and deliberately, testing each foothold and handhold before committing her full weight. One misstep could send her tumbling down the mountainside, ending the mission before it began. As she climbed, Maria found herself thinking about the path that had brought her to this moment. Growing up in a small Texas town, she had dreamed of adventure and service, drawn to the military by a combination of patriotism and a desire to prove herself in the most demanding environment possible. The journey from that small-town girl to a Navy SEAL sniper, lying in wait on an Afghan mountainside, had been long and difficult, filled with obstacles and doubters who questioned whether a woman belonged in special operations. But here she was, trusted by her teammates and her commanders, to execute one of the most critical aspects of a complex and dangerous mission. The weight of that trust was both humbling and empowering, driving her to perform at the highest level regardless of the personal cost. Finally reaching her designated position, Maria began the careful process of establishing her hide site. The location Chen had selected was indeed exposed, offering little natural concealment beyond a few scattered boulders and scrub vegetation. Using her camouflage netting and natural materials, she constructed a basic hide that would break up her outline while still allowing the muzzle clearance necessary for accurate shooting. Setting up her rifle took another 30 minutes of careful adjustment and preparation. She established range cards for various points within the compound, accounting for the extreme range and challenging shooting conditions. At 1,200 meters, even a slight miscalculation could mean the difference between a successful shot and a complete miss. Through her powerful spotting scope, the compound gradually became visible in the pre-dawn light. The intelligence photographs had been accurate but incomplete. There were more buildings than expected, and the defensive positions were more sophisticated than the satellite images had suggested. Several guard towers provided overlapping fields of fire, and she could see the glint of metal that suggested heavy weapons emplacements. "Overwatch in position," she whispered into her radio, her voice barely audible even to herself. "Copy, Overwatch, beginning final approach," came Chen's response. Through her scope, Maria watched as the assault team moved into position around the compound. They were still several hundred meters away, using the pre-dawn darkness to conceal their movement. The plan called for them to wait until full daylight before initiating the attack, giving Maria time to identify key targets and assess the enemy's defensive positions. As the sun rose higher, activity within the compound began to increase. Guards emerged from various buildings, taking up positions and beginning what appeared to be routine security patrols. Maria counted at least 15 armed individuals, though she suspected there were many more inside the buildings. Then she saw him. A tall, distinguished-looking man emerged from the largest building, accompanied by several subordinates. Even at 1,200 meters, there was something about his bearing and the deference shown by others that marked him as a leader. This had to be Colonel Aziz. Maria centered her crosshairs on the figure, calculating the necessary adjustments for range, wind, and elevation. The shot was at the extreme edge of her capabilities, but well within the theoretical limits of her rifle and ammunition. She could take the shot now, potentially ending the mission before the assault phase even began. But something made her hesitate. The man was surrounded by subordinates, and a miss at this range might alert the entire compound to her presence. More importantly, the assault team was still moving into position and might be caught in the open if the enemy was alerted prematurely. Overwatch to team leader. I have eyes on probable primary target. Request permission to engage. Negative Overwatch. Wait for the assault phase to begin. We need to be in position first. Maria acknowledged the order and continued her surveillance, tracking the target as he moved around the compound. Colonel Aziz appeared to be conducting an inspection of the defenses, stopping at various guard posts and speaking with his subordinates. His military bearing was evident even at this distance, and Maria found herself grudgingly respecting his professionalism even as she prepared to kill him. 20 minutes later, Chen's voice crackled through her headset. All units, initiate assault phase. Overwatch, you are cleared to engage targets of opportunity. The compound erupted into chaos as the assault team launched their coordinated attack from multiple directions. Maria immediately engaged the guard tower closest to the team's primary approach, her first shot silencing the heavy machine gun that had been positioned there. The .338 Lapua round struck the gunner center mass, spinning him around and dropping him instantly. Working quickly, she shifted to the second guard tower, but the occupant had already taken cover and was returning fire toward the assault team. Maria waited patiently for the target to expose himself, then placed a precise shot that ended the threat. Colonel Aziz had disappeared during the initial confusion, but Maria caught sight of him again as he moved between buildings, apparently trying to organize a defense. The range was still 1,200 meters. The target was moving, and there were obstacles partially obscuring her view. It would be one of the most difficult shots of her career. Maria controlled her breathing, calculated the lead angle for the moving target, and squeezed the trigger. Through her scope, she watched Colonel Aziz stumble and fall, her bullet finding its mark despite the challenging conditions. The insurgent leader struggled briefly to rise, then lay still. Primary target neutralized, Maria reported, already scanning for new threats. The battle continued for another 30 minutes as the assault team cleared the compound building by building. Maria provided continuous overwatch, engaging targets as they appeared and preventing enemy reinforcements from reaching critical defensive positions. Her accuracy at extreme range was devastating to enemy morale, as fighters found themselves vulnerable even when they thought they were safely concealed. But then, everything changed. A muzzle flash from one of the compound buildings caught Maria's attention, followed immediately by the distinctive crack of a high-velocity round passing uncomfortably close to her position. Someone in the compound was shooting back at her with a precision rifle, and their aim was disturbingly accurate. Maria immediately rolled to a new position, using the scattered boulders for cover as another round struck exactly where she had been lying moments before. Her opponent was skilled, probably using the muzzle flash from her own shots to locate her position. This was the counter-sniper engagement that Chen had warned her about, and her unknown opponent was proving to be every bit as dangerous as advertised. Moving carefully to avoid exposing herself, Maria began scanning the compound through her scope, looking for any sign of the enemy sniper's position. The angle of the incoming fire suggested he was positioned in the upper floor of one of the larger buildings, probably with excellent concealment and a clear view of her ridgeline. Another shot rang out, this one even closer than the previous attempts. Whoever was shooting at her was getting a better read on her position with each engagement. Maria knew she had to locate and neutralize this threat quickly before he managed to kill her or force her to abandon her overwatch duties. Using her spotting scope, she systematically examined each window and opening in the suspect building. The enemy sniper was well concealed, showing excellent fieldcraft and discipline. But everyone makes mistakes eventually, and Maria was patient enough to wait for that moment. There. A slight glint of reflected sunlight from an upper-story window, visible for just an instant before disappearing again. Her opponent had shifted position slightly, and his scope had caught the morning sun. Maria immediately shifted her rifle to engage the target, knowing she would have only seconds before he fired again. The window was small, partially obscured by debris, and at maximum range for her weapon system. But Maria had trained for shots exactly like this, and her confidence in her equipment and abilities was absolute. She steadied her breathing, centered her crosshairs on the barely visible target, and squeezed the trigger. The .338 Lapua round streaked across the valley and through the window with surgical precision. Maria watched through her scope as the glass exploded inward, and a dark shape fell away from the opening. The enemy sniper's rifle tumbled from the window and clattered to the ground in the courtyard below. "Counter-sniper threat neutralized," Maria reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. The remainder of the assault proceeded without major incident. With their leader dead and their heavy weapons silenced, the remaining insurgents quickly lost the will to fight. Some surrendered, others attempted to flee into the surrounding mountains. But the coordinated attack had been devastatingly effective. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Maria maintained her overwatch position until the assault team had completed their mission and begun their withdrawal. The communications equipment had been destroyed, intelligence materials had been gathered, and the insurgent cell had been effectively eliminated. It was a complete tactical victory, achieved with no casualties among the SEAL team. The extraction helicopter arrived precisely on schedule, and within minutes the entire team was airborne and heading back to base. As they flew over the compound one final time, Maria could see smoke rising from several of the buildings and the bodies of those who had chosen to fight rather than surrender. Back at the forward operating base, the debriefing was thorough and professional. Maria's performance was specifically commended, particularly her engagement of the enemy sniper at extreme range under challenging conditions. The shot that had eliminated Colonel Aziz was described as exceptional, combining technical skill with tactical awareness in a way that had turned the tide of the battle. But as she sat in her quarters later that evening, cleaning her rifle and reviewing the day's events, Maria found herself thinking not about the praise or the successful completion of the mission. Instead, she found herself remembering the face of the young sentry from her first mission and wondering about the enemy sniper she had killed that morning. Had he been a former Afghan military officer like Colonel Aziz? Did he have family who would mourn his death? These questions had no answers, and Maria had learned that pursuing them led only to sleepless nights and emotional paralysis. But they persisted nonetheless, a reminder of the human cost of warfare even when conducted with surgical precision and clear moral justification. A knock on her door interrupted her brooding. Morrison entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression that was becoming familiar after difficult missions. "Thought you might want to talk about today," he said, settling into the room's only chair. Maria accepted the coffee gratefully, appreciating both the caffeine and the gesture of friendship. Morrison had become something of a mentor to her, helping her process the psychological challenges of their work while maintaining the emotional discipline necessary for continued effectiveness. "That was some shooting today," Morrison continued. 1,200 meters on a moving target, then that counter-sniper engagement. I've been doing this for 8 years, and I'm not sure I could have made those shots. Training and luck, Maria replied modestly. The conditions were better than they appeared. Morrison shook his head. That wasn't luck, and we both know it. That was pure skill combined with the kind of courage that can't be taught. You probably saved several lives today with those shots. They talked for nearly an hour about the mission, the challenges they had faced, and the psychological aftermath of combat. Maria found herself opening up about her doubts and fears, her concerns about the growing body count, and her struggle to maintain her humanity while excelling at the science of killing. "You know what separates the good ones from the great ones?" Morrison asked as he prepared to leave. "The good ones learn to compartmentalize, to shut off their emotions and just do the job. The great ones find a way to keep their humanity while still performing at the highest level. You're one of the great ones. Maria, don't ever forget that." As the door closed behind him, Maria felt a familiar sense of gratitude for the brotherhood she had found among these warriors. They understood the burdens she carried because they carried the same burdens themselves. In their acceptance and support, she had found not just professional respect but genuine friendship forged in the crucible of combat. The mission had been another success, another step in her development as both a sniper and a leader. But more importantly, it had been another affirmation that she belonged among the elite ranks of the Navy SEALs, not as a token or a symbol, but as a warrior who had earned her place through skill, courage, and unwavering dedication to her teammates. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, new opportunities to prove herself. But tonight, Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez could rest, knowing that she had once again risen to meet every test that had been placed before her. The female sniper had become an integral part of SEAL Team 7, respected and trusted by men who accepted nothing less than perfection from themselves and their teammates. The war would continue, and with it the need for warriors capable of making the hard choices and impossible shots. Maria had proven herself ready for both, and her teammates slept better knowing she was watching over them with her rifle and her unwavering commitment to their shared mission. The intelligence briefing at Bagram Air Base was unlike anything SEAL Team 7 had experienced in their previous deployments. Instead of the usual conference room setting, they found themselves in a secure facility deep within the base, surrounded by representatives from multiple intelligence agencies and high-ranking military officials. The presence of so many senior personnel indicated that this mission was of critical importance to the overall war effort. Maria took her seat at the briefing table, noting the subtle but unmistakable change in how she was treated by the assembled officers. 6 months earlier, her presence would have generated curious stares and whispered conversations. Now, she was simply another member of an elite unit, accepted and respected for her proven capabilities in combat. The transformation felt surreal, but she had learned to accept recognition gracefully while maintaining focus on the mission at hand. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the base intelligence chief, began the briefing with an unusual degree of formality. Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm about to share with you is classified at the highest levels. The operation we're discussing today could significantly impact the trajectory of coalition operations in this theater. The large screen at the front of the room displayed a detailed map of the Afghanistan-Pakistan border region, with several locations marked in red. Maria recognized the area as one of the most dangerous and contested regions in the country, a mountainous wilderness that served as a sanctuary for high-level insurgent leaders and foreign fighters. For the past 18 months, Colonel Hayes continued, intelligence assets have been tracking a network of insurgent leaders who have been coordinating attacks across multiple provinces. The network is led by a man known only as the Architect, believed to be a former Pakistani military officer with extensive training in special operations and asymmetric warfare. The screen changed to display a series of attack sites, each one showing the aftermath of sophisticated ambushes and bombing operations. The damage was extensive, the casualties significant, and the tactical sophistication evident even in the reconnaissance photographs. These were not the random acts of desperate fighters, but carefully planned operations executed by professionals. The Architects Network has been responsible for over 40 coalition casualties in the past year, Colonel Hayes explained grimly. More importantly, his operations have been designed to maximize psychological impact and media coverage, turning individual attacks into propaganda victories for the insurgency. Lieutenant Commander Chen studied the intelligence briefings with growing concern. Ma'am, what makes this network different from the other insurgent cells we've been targeting? The casualty figures are significant, but not unprecedented. The difference, Commander, is sophistication and resources, Colonel Hayes replied. The Architect has been training insurgent cells in advanced tactics, providing them with sophisticated weapons and communications equipment, and coordinating their operations in ways that multiply their effectiveness. Intelligence analysts believe that neutralizing this network could reduce insurgent effectiveness by 30 to 40% across the region. The implications were staggering. A successful mission could significantly impact the overall war effort, potentially saving hundreds of coalition lives and disrupting insurgent operations for months or even years. But the risks would be commensurate with the potential rewards. What do we know about the Architect himself? Asked Chief Petty Officer Sullivan. Colonel Hayes activated a new screen showing a shadowy figure in what appeared to be a training video. Very little, unfortunately. He maintains strict operational security and rarely exposes himself to surveillance or human intelligence gathering. What we do know suggests he's a highly trained professional with extensive military experience and a genius-level understanding of unconventional warfare. Maria found herself studying the grainy image intently. Even in the poor-quality footage, there was something about the figure's bearing and movement that suggested exceptional training and discipline. This would not be like their previous targets who had been dangerous but predictable. The Architect represented a different level of threat entirely. The intelligence breakthrough came 3 days ago, Colonel Hayes continued. One of our assets reported that the Architect will be attending a meeting of regional cell leaders in a remote compound near the Pakistani border. This represents the first time we've had reliable intelligence on his location and possibly our only opportunity to eliminate him and his network in a single operation. The screen displayed detailed satellite imagery of the target compound, nestled in a valley between towering mountain peaks. The location was remote and heavily fortified, accessible only by narrow mountain paths that would provide excellent defensive positions for anyone attempting to hold the area. It was, Maria realized, a perfect location for someone who understood military tactics and the importance of controlling key terrain. The compound is heavily defended, Colonel Hayes admitted. Intelligence estimates suggest 40 to 60 fighters, many with military training and all equipped with sophisticated weapons. The terrain provides natural defensive advantages, and the remote location means that any assault force will be operating without the possibility of rapid reinforcement or extraction. Chen leaned forward, his expression intense. "Ma'am, what's our timeline? If the architect maintains good operational security, he won't stay in one place for long." "The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow night," Colonel Hayes replied. "We have perhaps 18 hours to plan and execute this operation before the opportunity disappears, possibly forever." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. 18 hours was barely enough time for proper reconnaissance, let alone the detailed planning that such a complex operation normally required. They would be operating with incomplete intelligence against a sophisticated enemy, in terrain that favored the defenders. "Sir," Maria spoke for the first time during the briefing, addressing Colonel Hayes directly. "What kind of Overwatch positions are available in the target area?" Colonel Hayes manipulated the satellite imagery, highlighting several ridgelines and elevated positions around the compound. "Limited, I'm afraid. The valley walls are steep and offer few viable positions for long-range engagement. The best option appears to be this ridgeline here." She indicated a position approximately 800 meters from the compound, but it's exposed and offers limited concealment. The position would be challenging but workable, assuming she could reach it undetected and establish an effective hide site. The range was within her capabilities, though the elevated angle would complicate bullet drop calculations. "There's one more complication," Colonel Hayes added. "Intelligence suggests that the architect has his own sniper team, probably Pakistani military personnel with advanced training. Any Overwatch element will need to be prepared for counter-sniper operations. The prospect of facing professional snipers while supporting a complex assault operation added another layer of difficulty to an already challenging mission." Maria felt a familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension as she contemplated the technical and tactical challenges ahead. The briefing continued for another hour, covering insertion and extraction procedures, communication protocols, and contingency planning. The mission would require precise timing and flawless execution, with no margin for error. One mistake could cost lives and compromise the entire operation. As the formal briefing concluded, Chen gathered his team for their own planning session. The challenges were significant, but the importance of the mission was undeniable. This was their chance to strike a decisive blow against the insurgency, to eliminate a threat that had been plaguing coalition forces for months. "Rodriguez," Chen said, turning his attention to Maria, "I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The Overwatch position is exposed. The enemy will be looking for you specifically, and you'll be operating at the limit of effective range for most of your targets. If you don't feel confident about this mission, speak up now." Maria considered the question carefully. The risks were significant, possibly greater than anything she had faced in her previous deployments, but the potential impact of success was equally significant, and she trusted her training and her equipment to carry her through the challenges ahead. "I'm ready, sir," she replied firmly. "The position is workable, and the range is within my capabilities. I'll need additional time for reconnaissance and preparation, but I can make it work." Chen nodded approvingly. "That's what I wanted to hear. Morrison, you'll be her spotter for this operation. The complexity of the target area and the presence of enemy snipers makes this a two-person job." The next 12 hours were a blur of preparation and planning. Maria and Morrison studied every available piece of intelligence about their assigned position, calculating approach routes and identifying potential hide sites. They prepared their equipment meticulously, selecting ammunition for the expected ranges and conditions, and reviewing emergency procedures in case the mission went wrong. Maria found herself returning repeatedly to the grainy image of the architect,